From his basement studio in Rockland, Ontario, it's the Alec McNorman Show. Today's guest will be Cope Wilson. Unfortunately, because we want to keep our podcast to 30 minutes or 30 to 35, max 40 minutes, this interview will be brought to you in two different installments. It will be part one, which will be about 40 minutes, and then there will be part two, which will be also another 35 to 40 minutes. I promise you a great show. Cope is a great guest. And without further ado, here is the interview with Cope Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend Cope Wilson. Welcome to the show, Cope.
Thanks, Norm.
Good to see you, buddy. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. And we've had a couple of good chats the last 2 days and been staying together over social media. So I appreciate you taking the time for doing this. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to do a quick bio, and then we'll get into some chit-chat stuff.
Sounds good to me.
All right, brother. Okay, so for those of you that have never had the pleasure of meeting Cope Wilson, he's recently medically released from the Canadian Armed Forces over 100 days ago now, I think it was, Shane? Yep. And so joined the military on 9/11, although he found out when he went down there that he was too young to join the military because he was only 16. So they sent him back, and he went on to the reserves, and then from the reserves did his first tour in Afghanistan. And while he was there, he found out about the Canadian Special Operations Regiment and CANSOFCOM, and put in for his notice of intent to go to the regiment for selection, and made it through selection. And that's where I actually met Shane, was at CSOR. Coming through, I think I taught on the TCCC course or whatever, but I remember vividly, Shane coming through with another buddy of mine that was a medic as well, Jamie. So he's done tours to Afghanistan and Iraq, and as no surprise as people are starting to pick up in the media and stuff, those tours and some of the things that our guys do and see over there are not overly pleasant sometimes. So he came down with PTSD and quickly turned to self-medicating himself, not realizing what was happening, because he was a hard charger for ever since I've known him, and still is. But then, unfortunately, the self-medication got a bit out of hand, and he became addicted and has done some rehab. And we're going to discuss that because it's near and dear to his heart, and I think it's an important topic. So now that he's on a journey of self-discovery, he's on his way. Well, he's actually in BC now, and I'm hoping to join him in a couple of months to see out there. So now he helps enjoying others by doing what we're doing right now and sharing his story. Enjoying fly fishing, which still baffles me. I don't know how to do that, but he's gonna teach me when Linda and I get out there in the wintertime. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to his music yet, his music is fantastic. I've always been a big fan of outlaw country, and the stuff that he puts out is fantastic. We're going to talk about that. And he loves the outdoors. And so let's see what else here. Oh, and I hope you don't mind, but that thing that you sent me, I really want to put this out there, Shane. So, and I think a lot of people could live by these words. So authenticity is his currency. Honesty and trust are his commodities, and joy and happiness is his equity. And I think that's fantastic. And like I said, I've known Shane for a while. We've talked quite a bit over the years, but to see the journey of self-enlightenment and where he's at right now in his life is truly inspirational for myself, who's also going through my own journey. If you're an avid listener of the show, which might make two of yous, you would know that. But so, having said that, that's the introduction. Shane, very, very glad to know you. I think you're like salt of the earth guy. I know that you're an awesome dude. But like I said, when I first met you, I met you at a party at Jamie's place. You guys were just either finishing up your operative course, or it was over and you guys were getting ready to deploy. I can't really remember, but we were at a party at Jamie's place, and I just remember seeing you come around, and you came in and you're young, keen, eager, fucking fit dude, and just larger than life. You've always had this larger than life personality that I think has been fucking awesome. So um, that's how we met, and that's where we're at. And so I guess the first question I'd like I listened to the other podcast that you had with the other guy from was it Lead Hornets or Lead Wasps? Sorry, I think it
Lead
is
loss.
Lead Wasps.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a great interview. I loved hearing that. So without
Thanks.
going too much into all that other stuff, we know. So you came in, you joined the military, you went to CSOR, you did your stuff, you became a JTAC.
Yep.
And then, so we're just going to fast forward to, because I don't want to go into like all the deployment stuff and everything, because, um, if anybody wants to know like who you are or what you did, I'll put them on to the other podcast.
Awesome.
And just to say that, like I said, as far as like I've worked with a lot of guys at the Hill and Seesaw and all across the command, and you certainly stand out as one of the guys that just you're the fucking goods to me, and I really appreciate you taking the time. So the first question I have is we're gonna fast forward to when you started having your problems, and like what was your first indication that things were getting out of control, and then and like how did you find the help? Was there any help available for you at the time in Petawawa?
So, growing up in the East Coast and being an Army guy, consuming lots of like alcohol culture is a real issue in the Army and in the and on the East Coast where I grew up. There's this sort of, I don't remember where I first heard it, but I know that I was a young buck when you do all your when you do all of your medical interviews and things like that, annual Part Fives and all these sorts of things, where they ask you on the cage test, like how often do you drink, how many standard drinks do you have a week, these sorts of things.
Which we all lie on, by the way.
And that, and that's what I was getting to is
Yeah.
the fact that like I was a young impressionable soldier as a private in reserves, and I was like, did you guys tell the truth on that? And my master corporal 2IC was like, no, you never told the truth on that. I'm like, okay, so that was like ground zero of being dishonest with the medical people about substance consumption and abuse, and that's rampant and rife
Yep.
in military culture right now as well. And so it wasn't cool. Like the idea actually that if you were a functional alcoholic in a lot of ways, then you were actually looked up to in some instances. You know what I mean? Like we'd all been on those 10K runs in the morning where your t-shirt's tucked in and it's 7:30 PT parade and you're shaved and you stink of booze. But if you could stand up straight for the 5 minutes that the warrant showed up, and then if you didn't fall out of the run, then you were good to go. And that's the baseline for which a lot of us used our alcohol consumption. And that made such an impression upon me because I was basically using my ego and my pride to get me through things that I really was not, fit to do.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because like I remember too, like back in the it seems like so fucking long ago, but back when I was in shape and we do the same thing, like back in Petawawa, back in the early '90s, you could drink any night of the week. Like there's like it wasn't the way that it was when you got there, like in the late '90s or the late 2000s and stuff. Like you could go any night of the week and get fucking hammered, and we did. We went and got fucking hammered, and we went running. And I remember the people behind us, like saying, "Oh, you guys stop going out drinking. You smell like breweries when we're running." And like, well, fucking get in front of us, and then no problem. But anyway, no, I agree. And just so you know, like, I can't think of even one medical person that has answered that alcohol question honestly. Not one.
uh, yeah.
But anyway, yeah,
Fast
go ahead.
forward. Yeah, I was gonna say fast forward and in the whole sort of recovery from substance abuse, particularly hard drug use. I never started. I didn't make a lick of headway until I got honest with myself and started getting honest with my docs. I guess I was a straight edge really until I was about 29 years old. I got sent to the language school when I was, after a tour. I needed a bit of a break. I'd been kind of run ragged, you know what I mean? And ended up living in a penthouse apartment in Bywood Market in Ottawa with my best friend. I had all my stuff in a U-Haul truck. I'm going to move in with a girl who I was super sweet on up there. And she breaks up with me over text message like the day before. My stuff's like in the truck on my way to her place. We're going to move in together. And it all kind of fell apart.
Nice.
So I found myself single. I found myself doing 2-a-days at a gym. I got in great shape, but it wasn't wrong. I looked the best I'd ever looked, but I was not in great physical shape. I was doing isogenics, and I was mixing my evening shake for isogenics with vodka. and then I'd walk down to my local, which was like a hipster bar called well, it doesn't matter what it's called,
Yeah.
but it's a dive bar in Ottawa in the market,
I
and I loved
remember
it.
I remember meeting you there one time with your best friend, and I was fucking amazed like how they had that room closed off where you guys were.
Oh yes, yes,
Is that the
that was
same
for
bar?
no, it was a different one. It's the
Oh,
one that's
okay.
by it's one that's by the strip club. but
Wait,
but
there's a
it was
strip
just
club downtown?
yeah, yeah,
Which,
yeah.
by the way, Barbarella's isn't there anymore.
No, it's called Fairfax.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, was this the thing like where I was supposed to like? Okay, anyway, I'm gonna stop talking. But
No, no, that's
yeah,
perfect.
no, I I found myself I found myself in a space where I was hanging out with what I thought were good people. I was single and I was, trying to talk to girls. At that time in my life, that was like important stuff.
Hmm.
And I get that, right? Like you're a man and you do a job that's like kind of an alpha job, and but I was hanging out with like hipsters and hippies, and then they don't really like people that are in the military. And I liked being in a town where nobody were in the army. It was the first time I'd ever tried hard drugs was during that time, and it got its hooks in me,
Yeah,
and it had its hooks in me despite my best efforts and despite work's best efforts for years, man. It's honestly like I said, I got 4 combat tours to Iraq and Afghanistan. I've got 5, and the combat tour that I fight against addiction is the fucking Psoriasis War. It's the longest and it's been the greasiest so far.
that's okay. Don't worry about it,
And
man. I clicked the little explicit thing on when I put the podcast out, so everybody knows there's
oh
going
yeah,
to be swearing in there, so it's all good.
I try not to. I in hopes. So I also kind of like this is not my shameless plug or anything, but like I forward this to my friends in hopes that another person on a podcast might want to have me to come talk about this exact same thing
Yeah,
because I want to advocate for veterans, their mental health, and substance abuse.
hmm,
At the time that I was really struggling, there are some elements of that, like very raw, very authentic evenings and moments and events that I recall in the depth of active addiction to cocaine that I'm still too ashamed to really bring it up and talk about that. But someday I will. Someday I will bring it up. And the story of a guy who is like, I did very well for myself in like the 2010, 2011, 2012 time frame, and then it all the fall from grace, man, and it was substance. It
yeah,
was it was fucking substance, and I'm still I harbor a lot of shame for that, and so I want to get real and talk about it. There were a lot of resources in Pat. There are a lot of resources in the military, but you got to be honest.
hmm,
And more important than that, well, no, wrong. Actually, you know what? Yes, more important than that. In order for us to feel like we have a space where we can be honest and not judged, they need to create, not need to create, but the system does not allow for guys to be forthcoming with a lot of that stuff. Because in my particular instance, if I went on a temporary medical category for more than 181 days, I had a lot of money taken away from me as an operator.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
uh, you're losing. If I'm honest, and they put me on a category that's longer than 6 months, I lose $1,500 a month.
yep,
So that's multiply whatever that is annually. And it's one thing to take money away from, or it's one thing to take money away from you, man. But I don't have kids, so it's different. But like, if you've got a young lad in hockey, or you've got a wife that likes to go and maybe she's into some hobby that you can subsidize and improve upon her quality of life with that little bit of extra money that you get because your job is a little bit more dangerous and you're gone a little bit more often. And now you're seeking help because you're gone and doing that job that's more dangerous and more often. You're medicating with substances, or even if you just break your leg.
yep,
Now the quality of life of your family is suffering because now you don't have the disposable income to keep, Billy in hockey,
yep.
or your missus can't go on, the girls' nights because you don't have not that I mean, you can't do the things and enjoy the quality of life you had because now that you've been honest, they're taking away your money.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, I was just leaving the command. That was around 2014 when that came out, and I was just leaving the command when they threw that out, and all of us in the medical services were like, "Well, where the fuck is this coming from? Like this is not a medical decision because, like you just said, number one, it's not in your best interest to self-identify any longer because you're going to be out 6 months and you're out of all that money."
Yep.
And number two is like fucking, you're supposed to be paid, like even when the guys went like left the regiment and went to Sotsi or whatever the fuck we called it, Sotsi, the school, they would lose their allowances. I'm like, why the fuck are you losing your allowances? You're being paid for what you know and what you do. So, okay, you're not fucking kicking indoors right now, but you're teaching guys to fucking kick indoors, or you're teaching hell ops, or you're teaching this, that, and the other thing. You should still get the fucking money for it. Like, it's just, it made no sense to me. So, regardless of, and again, like, it's something that if I was still in the military and I was at Medical Services Group headquarters still, I'd still be trying to fight that because I think it's ridiculous that, somebody who's like, I mean, let's face it, you've been through the training and stuff. I've seen it. Um, it's no fucking walk in the park to make it through selection, let alone the entire course and stuff. And that's just the beginning. That's your start. That's your start point. And then you got to keep putting your body through all this shit and everything just to stay at the high speed that you are. And then you get injured doing it, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, man. Like, we no longer want to give you that money for that anymore." It's like it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But
There
sorry.
still is a real stigma. Like with, it's one thing if a guy walks into the compound or he walks around town, he's got a cast on his leg. They can look at him and be like, "Yeah, this guy's clearly broken." And he's. What if it takes my leg more than 6 months to heal?
Yeah,
You know
then
what I
you
mean?
lose that money.
And then you lose that money, or
Yeah.
like, but it's another thing too to walk around. And I don't have a PTSD diagnosis. I thought that I did have PTSD. I think that I might still have it. I don't know,
Mm.
but I had ardently and fervently tried to get all of my mental health stuff. Like I was released for mental health. I was released for those reasons, not my physical health.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get all of that stuff down on paper so that when I navigate the Veterans Affairs system, it's a little bit more cut and dry.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one where they're like, we don't really know if you have it. One of the problems I ran into is like, well, we can't diagnose you with stuff like that if you're on the sauce and if you're doing drugs. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you need? And they're like, we need you to give me 6-8 months of clean and dry, and we'll redo some of these tests again, and we'll have another look at it. And I'm like, okay, boss, let's do that. And so I did. I did the treatment thing. That was after a suicide attempt, and did the treatment thing. And I did the requisite amount of time dry. When I got out of treatment, I asked to get reassessed, and I was told no.
Yeah.
I had been screened previously for it, and they said no, we screened you before for this stuff. It's like, yeah, but I wasn't sober, and they're like, yeah. Anyway,
yeah,
it wasn't followed up on.
yeah.
And I'm not here to point, like, don't get me wrong, man. I'm not gonna. I love the regiment, I love the unit, and I really like the army. And there's some things that needs to be held accountable for. It's also not my job to do that. But this is just me speaking honestly and candidly about some of the things that I'd experienced, and in that as well is I can't pedestal myself because I wasn't the best patient either. I was a challenging patient, and I know that, and I know that the docs that you and I know, both of us,
Yeah.
and the nurses that work there know that I was a challenge, and I'm from the bottom of my heart, I apologize for the hardships, professional and otherwise, that I had brought upon them, but yeah, they did their best they could with me.
Well, the thing is, though, is like I said, like I remember you from before your time with addiction and stuff, and a little bit, like I said, I was there near the end when you were coming in and having some issues, but I didn't really get involved because it wasn't my place, it wasn't my job.
Well, you're a professional.
But
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, I don't think you're a pain in anybody's ass. If anything, the thing that it's a common denominator that I have with a lot of my friends that have PTSD and a lot of my operator friends and even guys that aren't operators. Um, you know, the reason why you would consider yourself to be a poor patient is the same reason why it made you such an awesome fucking soldier. Is because at the end of the day, you're just trying to, like, you showed up to the UMS and you wanted to say, okay, I'm not doing good. I want to know, like, how I can get better. And then so, they'd be like, okay, we'll do this, get sober, and then, okay, then we can reassess you. And then you do that, and then they don't follow up on it. Of course you're going to get fucking pissed. Like you and I talked about a little bit about, I'm gonna say his name because fuck it, it is what it is. Like Royce, like I fucking still love the man, and I would love to still be able to talk to him and stuff. But he was treated the same way. Like like he said, I got a fucking problem, and they kind of fucked him off, and then he had to do everything on his own, and so I don't begrudge people that are like that, because like I said, one of the things I want to talk to you about is like your transition from the military through Petawawa, because I got released in Ottawa here, and my experience with release was fucking golden. Like I have been treated awesomely since I went and said, hey, I need help. And from what I'm gathering, like, and again, this isn't like a Petawawa bashing thing because I know people are trying to do their best, But I know that the care and the process that I went through here in Ottawa through the same thing with JPSU is not what you guys are experiencing in Petawawa. So I wanted to talk to you about that as well.
I was so like you become institutionalized in the army, and like my job that I had was very specific, but it was also very broad. It was broadly specific. That's a terrible way to describe it. Oh my goodness.
But
Um,
you know what? I like that. I'm going to write that down. Actually, broadly
broadly
specific.
specific. Yeah. No thanks. But I don't know if there's ever been a worse wrong. The people in Petawawa know how to release people. The common denominator in my terrible release process was me, because I
Mm,
didn't go to a lot of appointments, and I didn't pick up the phone, and I didn't go and do the admin, and I didn't clear out of that place, and it was me.
mm,
My release sucked, and on the way out the door, it sucked, but the people that I had in contact with did absolutely everything. They did their job, and they followed policy, and they did the best they could. I was the one that drug my ass off.
mm,
It was me. I was just in such a terrible place, man. I just and it was terrible in that, like, you start falling away from the guys, and you start falling away from a job that you loved, and it starts to really start to weigh on you. Like, what am I going to do with my life? Is this it? Like, I was not in a great spot. I was living alone in a little PMQ kind of over there, and I just had such a hard time, man. The resources were there. I can't knock them because they were there. I just never took advantage of them because I was just too absorbed in my own. I was wallowing in my misery, man. It
yeah.
was me,
And
and
do you think that's typical then? You think that a lot of the people that have these negative stories with release, or a lot of it is because they're not ready for it yet and they drag their heels, or
I that's it. I don't know, but
mm,
I can tell my story.
yeah.
But and some guys too, like they'll get into the Veterans Affairs program or that process, and they'll get really frustrated. One thing that really helped me when I started dealing with Veterans Affairs a couple years, like maybe a year before I got out, was and I don't even know where I came up with this, because I would love to attribute it to someone else because it's way smarter than anything I can come up with. Is when I started looking at Veterans Affairs and our interactions, when I started looking at them more like I was dealing with an insurance company, it tempered and managed my expectations and 180'd how I feel about them.
Mm,
Um, I didn't ever took anything. Now I don't take anything personally. And having said that, I'm still new in that process. But they also, like, despite the song that I wrote, where, like, Veterans Affairs is messing this guy around and doctors this and that, I have not had nothing but, like, I've had a good experience with them. I really have.
hmm.
But I know a lot of guys haven't, and I don't know why. But um, I don't know why. But
I,
yeah,
I, I
my
think
experience so far
I
has been
think
okay.
if I can interject, I think one of the main reasons is because in the military, like especially in SOF, like we're used to having everything fucking handed to us, and like we need it,
Yep.
and we need it and get it, and then when it's time for us to release, and we go through this process, and now we're in this big giant machine with VAC. Like I said, my only concern with VAC was how long it took for things to get through. But once I got my approvals and everything like that, like it's been fucking fantastic. So what
Yep.
took so long with me, and that's where I think where everybody gets their frustration from, is because it just takes so goddamn long to get your file processed. But once it's processed, man, it's golden. Like I haven't had like any real issues with VAC ever since. In fact, my case manager is fantastic. She's put me on to these modalities of care that I never even knew existed. So it's awesome.
I don't. I don't have a case manager yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I've been out 105 days. I think 110 days, something like that. I had a victory beer on the back porch there with my guy who's graciously hosting me here, and putting me up, while I figure my stuff out. And I was like, I've been out of the army 100 days today, man. That feels crazy.
Hmm.
But yeah, man, it. There's a lot of guys running frustrating. It's an admin system, and then COVID this and all this other stuff. Like, sure, it's not fast, but like when I changed the frame of reference to the frame of time, I remember there were things that I had to do when you parachute, for example. Norm, are you a paratrooper, Norm?
No, I got fucking drummed out on the last day of the mock tower with full kit. I asked the question. I said, "How do you jab with the kit on your feet?" And they kicked me off the course. So, but
I'm a
but I'm glad that you brought that up because I've always wanted to say this. I'm glad that I didn't get my wings because I would have been the biggest fucking arsehole on the planet if I came back from Edmonton with my
Oh
jump
yeah.
wings, because I was, like I said, back then I was young and fit and keen, and I was a bit more aggressive than I should have been. And if I came back with those fucking wings, man, there would have been no living with me. So it's kind of a good thing when I look back at it. I'm telling you, I would have been the biggest fucking prick ever, man. Like fucking Clayton Matchy. What am I allowed to say his name? Anyway, he probably would have been a fucking. He would have been a considered to be a fucking Boy Scout compared to me, man. Because I literally I think I would have been the biggest asshole on the planet if I came back with my wings. It humbled me, really. It did.
You know what? I got all kinds of humble stories too, so I can appreciate where that's coming from. But
Yeah.
I look at when I look at the Veterans Affairs stuff in the sense of like time and urgency, like paratrooping, um, being a paratrooper, you leave the aircraft, you have X number of seconds to conduct a certain series of drills, or else you don't live,
4 seconds.
right? So it, there's a lot of other things in the army that have timelines associated to them.
Yep.
And we get used to, when you deal with the last 80 meters of foreign policy as a matter of your profession of arms, you get used to the idea that like this bomb's time of fall is 34 seconds. That's a critical 34 seconds, and if it's 36 seconds, that makes a difference in stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we're used to things happening or having a requirement for having to have them happen very quickly and perfectly, and we get used and accustomed to that.
Yeah.
And when I submit paperwork to Veterans Affairs and it takes 6 months, I'm like, nothing takes 6 months. Like I can like I can make an operator in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I can. And then so when paperwork goes through a snail mail chain and sort of that sort of thing, and we're used to things happening like very quickly,
Yep.
the time tempered stuff, we're unsatisfied.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get the wherewithal to slow down. And that's one of my problems, man. And since I got to this island, I've visited my veteran buddies that are around here. I've met a new one again today, man. Steve used to be at the unit, and every one of them tell me the same thing. They're like, "Bro, you gotta slow down. You
Yep.
gotta slow down." And that's when I pump in stuff to Veterans Affairs and says like, "Yeah, it's probably gonna take 6 weeks." I'm like, "It's all good, man. It's all good.
Yep.
Let it take 6 weeks. You know what? Let it take 12. It's gone. Fine.
Yep.
Because it's gonna teach me to slow down too, and I'm okay with that because we need to do that, brother."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. That's great. Speaking of slowing down,
Yeah.
we were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I'd like for you to retell that story about fly fishing in northern Ontario.
Oh,
Was it last year? Like, because like the way that you explained it, it's like I haven't had that fucking aha moment yet, but I'm really hoping going out to BC is going to do that for me. So, if you can tell the listeners about that, all two of them.
I'm very blessed and privileged, and I'm super grateful for a very close buddy of mine named Don. Don's probably my best buddy in the unit, and we go so far back. And he invited me up to Don's a native, and Donnie's Native American, and I got invited up to their to a large family tribal gathering that they do up there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not exclusively natives, but it's on a native game preserve. The Chapleau Game Preserve in Northern Ontario is the largest game preserve on the planet. Like, and I'm talking Africa, I'm talking all that stuff. It's the largest natural game preserve on the planet, and they have a lease out there on a couple cabins by these beautiful lakes. And Donnie and I have drank many a bottle of whiskey and written many a song about this place because it just captures your soul. I maintain that my heart belongs in the mountains of the Rocky Mountains of Montana, but my soul lives in Northern Ontario.
Mm.
And I was out there. I was the only fly fishing guy. These dudes go out for pickerel o'clock, which is usually just around last light time frame, and they smash a bunch of pickerel and come back. And we'll have some homemade wine and drink, and we'll make a fish fry. But I would get up in the morning early, and I would go fly fishing on some of these things, streams myself. It's called blue lining, where you just look at a 1 to 50 map, and there's a lake there, but there's a little blue stream on the map that leads into this lake. I'm like, you know what, man? I'm gonna hop out to that stream, and I'm gonna fly fish it, just cause. And I think about the cool idea that like I wonder if anybody has ever fly fished this waterway before, because it's so remote in northern New Brunswick or northern Ontario.
Yeah.
And one of them that I had found was it was quite wide. It was several say roadways wide, and something about it. I'm in waist deep water, I couldn't afford waders at the time, so I was just wearing like my army pants and like my shirt or whatever, my fly fishing rod, because you got to wade to fly fish. And on one side of the waterway, and I'm the only person. There's like the tribal folks that are back at the camp, maybe a few kilometers away. But other than that, you're hundreds of kilometers away from anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that remoteness spoke to me. It spoke to me in the silence of the trees. And I remember on one side of the bank, there's like this storm and there's rain and it's cloudy. And the bank that I was on was gorgeous. And there's a rainbow connecting the two. And I looked down at this fly rod I had in my hands, and I had this kind of strange kind of deja vu moment where I used to carry a gun.
Mm-hmm.
I was a professional gunfighter for my whole adult life. And there's a saying that goes, no matter every woman that you make love to, or every time you hold a newborn baby or your own child or a hockey stick or anything, your hands will never, ever, ever forget the feeling of holding a gun.
Mm.
And that gun used to bring me a sense of belonging to a community that I cherished. It used to bring me a sense of security that amongst the chaos that I could affect space. I could affect my own safety. Like I could fend off evildoers with this gun. And it gave me a sense of, and in that sense, it gave me a sense of peace. I was literally holding a machine that was keeping me alive. And in this strange moment, I looked down at this fly rod that's in my hand, and I too am holding this machine of cork and fiberglass and lined with a reel on it. And it's a machine that brings me zen and it brings me peace and it's keeping me alive.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I wept. I wept alone there in the woods, and I actually got to get emotional about talking about it. I wept alone there in the woods.
That's okay. Nobody can see you except for me. I'm the only one that can see your eyes welling up there, so that's good.
But that's okay, man. That's another thing I learned in treatment too, man. Is that when boys cry, they cry bullets, and there's only three ways that you work trauma or anxiety or depression or addiction out of your body, and it comes out in sweat, it comes out in tears, and it comes out in blood.
Mm.
And that's how it all went in too. So when you think of it, for all the times that you're putting that stuff in your body, man, you got to, for every day that you did it, you got to work it out. And whether it's tears or blood or sweat, and that's how it comes out too. So yeah. I don't mind. I'll
like you said, there's nothing wrong with asking for help, and getting the help that you need is paramount for being happy. And I can tell by looking at you, like I remember just before we went up to Pembroke to see you play that gig there in Pembroke, and we had that quick little chit chat in the bathroom there. Nothing sexual, but we were talking about how you I was talking about all the guns and stuff I have now and how you don't miss it and stuff like that. But the difference is like I can see the difference in you is like there's still a little bit of conflict in you, but like you've risen above it, and it's like, and that's what I like to see is like I don't like to see the guys that are dwelling on the shit that's making them angry. It's like the guys like you and hopefully me that when I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, yeah, I was a piece of shit at certain times, and I did some pretty stupid things. But you know what? At the end of the day, it wasn't me. It's because I was fucking hurting and I wasn't being honest with myself. And like you said, like your thing about honesty and trust being your commodity. It's like if you're lying to yourself, then you're lying to everybody else, and that's not how you want to live.
And really, like you can lie to everybody else if you want, man. The only person you really truly need to be honest with on the planet is yourself.
Yeah, I agree.
Like really, like yeah.
Yeah, which again to me is another great segue, because I also, when we talked about it earlier, with your interview with what's his name anyway, that guy, the Scottish guy,
Dave War.
Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah, he sounds like a pretty interesting dude too.
Yeah.
But yeah, like he started off a show with a little intro about yourself, and then he played your song, Cope and the VA, A Love Story. And I listened to it today, and I'm like, first of all, I still think it's going to be a #1 hit. I think it's awesome. We got to get that out there. But the story in it, like I asked you if Jesse was a real person, and you said yes. But the whole thing around it was a little bit differently. So, I guess what I'm asking you to do is because like I said, I love your music. I love how you put stuff out there. But you had an interesting story about how that song came about, and it's not always from clarity. It's from in sobriety where you get your inspiration. So can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, I guess I can. So we're talking about music and in sobriety in music.
Yep.
Um, we used to play. I played in an outlaw country band, and you ever heard the term "we're big in Japan"?
Yep.
Or the,
Yep.
for people that don't know what it means, it's like it's a double entendre kind of thing. Where like when you if I were to go to Japan because I'm taller than most Asian people, I would be considered bigger because I'm also a bigger
Mm-hmm.
person. Um, but there's also the term that like you're big in Japan is in like you might be a relatively unknown musical entity someplace, but then you go somewhere else and you're huge. I used to deliver pizzas with a dude at a pub in Pembroke who this guy was he would make a pizza. He was a short order cook, a very talented short order cook. Loved his job. Was a great guy to hang out with in the kitchen. And we talked about music. He listened to metal, and I'm like, I'm not a metal guy anymore. I kind of grew out of it,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. But I'm like, hey man, do you ever play anymore? He's like, I do a couple shows a year, kind of thing. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, where do you jam? He's like, honestly, like we practice here during the year, and our band is huge in Germany. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, check it out. And he showed me a YouTube video where he's playing like a packed stadium. He's playing stadium metal in Germany. And I'm like,
Jesus,
this guy makes pizzas in Canada. So
that's
yeah,
crazy, man.
on a much smaller scale, um, the guys that I played music with, we would go way the heck up to these Northern Ontario logging and mining communities where most bands never bothered going up there because there was like towns of like 1,000 people.
Yep.
And they're like, well, what am I going to do? Go play a Legion with 1,000 people? And we were like, let's go play Legions with 1,000 people that see like 3 live acts a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would fill these bars, man. We'd fill these bars, and they'd be like, when are you guys coming back again? Can you do another show tonight? And we'd be like, we got another gig like 100 clicks down the road. And so we try to put short tours for music into these like our leave blocks because one other dude was in the military as well. And I remember on one of those, I had hitched a cart of creative expression to one of substance abuse, where I lacked because I suffered from stage fright and a lot of those kinds of issues that come with music. And when you play the scene, the old saying goes like you hang around a barbershop long enough, you'll get a haircut. And so hanging out, I mean like hanging out with so there's sex and rock and roll, and then one other thing goes with that, and it's drugs.
Yeah.
And so you play the game long enough, and it's part of the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
One of those tours, I ended up driving the 8 hours back to pick up more because I had run out because I was sharing it with people. And on the way home, I stopped in a gas station in New Liskeard, Ontario, and got gas. And I'm like, oh, there's a CD there. And it was Stevie Ray Vaughan. And Stevie Ray Vaughan is a Texas blues man who is very heavily influenced by Jimi Hendrix. And Stevie Ray Vaughan is like, he's my inspiration. If I could plug a Ghost into my guitar, and I honestly think that one of the guitars I have a remastered Fender Custom Stevie Ray Vaughan #1, and it's the second most expensive thing I own after my truck. And I'm looking at this CD that I bought, and it's got a little leaflet in it where it has parts of the story. So I walked across the street to the pub, and I'm having a beer by myself, feeling sorry about myself on the come down, and kind of shitty for what I'd done. I bailed on my band, but I used to drive back to go hook up and then come back again. I'm like, oh, I'm such a jerk. And I'm reading this booklet, and it's about Stevie Ray Vaughan trying to get sober and play music, and he couldn't do it either. And I'm like, wow, we have that other thing in common, man. Me and Stevie Ray, man, we got it going. And then I got thinking about how my musical idol, is a guy who, at the end of the day, his greatest hit CD, is still $5 in a gas station in rural Northern Ontario. And the best I can ever hope for in the pursuit of music is maybe someday I might have a CD that's $5 in a rural gas station someplace in Texas. The Cope in the VA thing with the Jesse shout out in it was from a story where I was reaching out after writing some music. I'd been awake for a few days, and I reached out to a friend, Jessie, who we met 10 years before when I was in Ottawa, when things started going down the slippery slope. And no joke, we met online dating. And she was a troubled trauma nurse going through school. And she's like, yeah, I look at hang out with dead bodies all day. And I'm like, no, I don't know if this is for me, kind of thing, But we became friends. And she actually now is a case manager for guys that are releasing in PET. And I had her come over on her lunch break because I needed someone to talk to. And during that time, the phone rang, and it was my nurse. And we were supposed to do it was a COVID thing. So, like, we were doing our appointments over the phone. And with Jessie, my friend, in the car, I was able to tell honestly and have her there with me to hold me accountable to the truth And that was where things really started to change because I was able to tell her the truth. Tell my nurse the truth on the phone and say, look, we should probably do this in person because it's going to be a lot harder for me to lie to you in person than it is right now. But I have someone here that's holding me accountable. I've told them everything, and I want to tell you everything and get really, really friggin' honest.
Yeah.
And that was a huge turning point in my own mental health when I could walk in there and be on, and I mean huge honest about everything
Mm-hmm.
and about how bad it was. So yes, Jessie is she's a very real person, and she may or may not have had a positive. She definitely had a positive effect on my life. She may have even saved it.
Yeah.
Without even knowing.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. So if anybody is out there, and not everybody has the luxury of having a Jesse at their side, but if you can, and a lot of us, have people in our life that are always there for us, and we don't always look for it, and so there is the story of that is number one, you know, your Jesse is out there for everybody, hopefully. And number two, no, he did not go into the VA hospital with a. Well, everybody, that's part one of episode 8. Stay tuned for part 2. I hope you're enjoying it so far as much as I am. Obviously, there will be no rant at the end of this one. The rant will be at the end of episode 2.